Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Ted O'Neill. I'm the president of the Davis Alt.Pro Project. I'm also joined here by Mirai, another club officer who will help moderate this seminar. And if this is the first of our events that you're attending, you can check out our website. And you can learn more about us there, and you can also find our email list so that you can stay up to date with our future activities. And I'm just going to put that in the chat. Here we go. Yeah, and so tonight we're honored and excited to be able to hear from Dr. Yuki Hanyu. He's the founder and CEO of IntegriCulture and also leads the Shojinmeat Project. He holds a PhD in chemistry from Oxford University and has a pretty diverse skill set that he uses to promote the development of animal cell-based meat. And so in tonight's seminar, we'll get a chance to hear him talk about his background and the missions of the organizations that he leads. And so if you have any questions for Yuki that come up, you can just feel free to put them into the chat during the presentation, and then we'll just try to save time at the end to address those. Yeah, so without any further ado, I'll just turn it over to Yuki. Thanks so much for joining us. Yeah, so
Yeah. So how many minute session is this? Is like 40 minutes plus 20 minutes Q&A, or like how's the time managed?
we can try to
Uh,
leave, yeah, like maybe 15 minutes or so for
okay.
questions.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just running shared screen. Okay. Okay. Now can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Yuki Hanyu, the founder CEO of IntegriCulture Company, which is also a spin-off from citizen science DIY cell-based meat project called Shojinmeat Project, and the founder of that. And the slides I'm using now, it's actually available from the web, so anyone can access this shojinmeat.com and see the whole material along with others. Um, all the contents in this slides are basically creative under Creative Commons license, so you can use it for like whatever purposes, and just put a credit, and you can use for like other purposes. And just a brief introduction. This Trojan Meat project started by and me getting fascinated into like science fiction and since like childhood. And this dream for science fiction was the whole reason why I got into science and also got my PhD in nanotechnology, and ultimately started this cell-based meat project, and which means I could do something other, some more science fictions other than cell-based meat in the future. And basically it does everything. So not just the DIY stuff, but also like another another big mission is basically nurturing the next generation decision makers of this field. And this next generation can mean long-term next generation and very near-term next generation. And it's very near-term. What I mean is the people um, who are already in decision-making position, wanting to learn about cellular agriculture, and they sometimes come to us and they learn about cellular agriculture and go back to the workplace and continue with the policy-making stuff. And back to the topic, yeah, so the means of food production has started with hunting, but now we are seeing synthesis and cell culture coming. And basically, cellular agriculture concerns mainly the last one and possibly the synthesis as well. And probably since you're already like alt protein clubs, you know about all the problem space. So I think I'm just skipping this bit, and then there comes cellular agriculture of producing food or any other agricultural products, including fur, leather, and that kind of things as well, used by cell culture. And 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 it is often said that cellular agriculture will be much more efficient. But if you look at which part or what process makes cellular agriculture efficient, and there's a bit of a trick there because the process of cell culture itself, it is more efficient, but only about 10 times. And a much larger portion of this efficiency can actually come from how cell culture medium is made. Because currently, the meat production takes the upper route of grass to cow to meat, and but most of the cell-based meat studied as of today actually starts from the sun, goes into plants, and then into culture medium, and then into meat. So it's not harnessing the bit that makes the process much more efficient. So ultimately, the cellular agriculture should take the lower route of going via microalgae or artificial photosynthesis or that kind of thing. And the famous 2011 paper on life cycle assessment assumes the lower route, which is not quite materialized yet. And the cellular agriculture has got another way to look at it. So, and it is basically using cells as engineering materials. So, from back in history, people started using ores and found a way to use it as turned into metal as an engineering material. And same goes from petroleum to plastic. And now we are seeing these living cells to tissues, which can be used for like transplantable organs, or could be, or possibly even self-repairing materials and cyborg parts or stuff like that. And but more specifically on cell-based meat, the idea has been around for a pretty long time, but it's only recent that serious effort has been made. And in the first wave, there were some art projects, and then on the second wave, there's that's the movement that's leading us to where we are today, with all the startups and investment money going on. And some of the ongoing cell agriculture projects includes these kind of things, but this slide is totally insufficient for to describe everything that's going on. And so I'm going into the bit more science of that. And as some of you may have heard, the cell-based meat has been very, very expensive, at least in the 2013 demonstration. And what needs to be done is basically the culture medium has to be cheaper, and also the production process has to be scaled and automated, as well as it shouldn't be just a slurry of cells or just chunk of cells. So it has to be like structured into, and it has to be made tastier. So that concerns like added values, and that ultimately leads to consumer acceptance. So that the people will be paying for this. And on these three fronts, for the culture medium, the existing culture medium that led to that $250,000 hamburger is it consists of these three components: basal medium, fetal bovine serum, and other signal compounds. And they are very, very expensive stuff. And even the cheapest component, which is the basal medium, it's still somewhat expensive for what's actually in there. And fetal bovine serum signal compounds, it's not quite practical to use this in the first place when it comes to the unit economics. And but before we get into the strategy of how to make this cheaper, then we look at what it will be like if we use the existing process. So if it's an easy cell culture, that's still $5,000 per 100 gram, and there's also a culture medium that doesn't use fetal bovine serum, but uses synthetic serum. So initially, those animal rights activists has been like advocating for this kind of medium, but the price tag comes to about like $15,000 per 100 grams. And when it comes to like liver cells and iPSCs, it's even more expensive. And to look at what's going and analyze what's going on here with the price. There's a cost of good analysis being done, and as you would notice that FGF2 and TGF-beta, these signal compounds, actually take up more than 95% of the whole cost. And yeah, FGF2, this thing costs about $2 million per gram, and TGF-beta costs $81 million per gram. And that's very expensive stuff. So then there's a first strategy of making these signal compounds cheaper by making it more efficient, or by making it more stable so that it can be produced by cheaper method, or maybe use something else. And the basic research money is being spent on this, and there are grant money by Good Food Institute on these approaches. And if that's achieved, then according to this literature by Good Food Institute, the cost of cell-based meat can come down to like $2.2 per pound. But unfortunately, most of the industry players, this is a bit too optimistic or too aggressive, and so the industry players are trying alternative methods than making growth factors cheaper. And GFI gives a figure of $4 per gram for growth factors. And this figure comes from industrial enzyme for like washing powder and stuff like that. So the thinking is that since growth factors can be produced in the same way those industrial enzymes are produced, it should be as cheap as this. And then there's a second approach, which is large-scale co-culture. And what we know is that cells themselves also produce signal compounds on spot. So if it's too expensive to get external growth factors and signal compounds, then why not make it on spot by culturing other cells? And that's what's being done by Aleph Farms and also by IntegriCulture company, which is based on this co-culture experiments done in Shojinmeat Project in earlier days. And in the case of the IntegriCulture as shown on the right, in this example, hepatocyte or liver cells produce signal compounds, and those the compounds produced by the liver cells flow into myoblasts, which is the muscle cells, and myoblasts grow. And the cells stay in each vessel. And here some of the results in early day Shojinmeat Project experiments of culturing liver cells without external addition of growth factors. So commonly, liver cells are cultured by adding hepatocyte growth factors, which is also very, very expensive stuff. And but basically, we've done it without using hepatocyte growth factors by taking growth factors produced by placental cells. And that's how this cell culture, the chicken liver paste, came out in 2017. And then if the growth factors and serum components can be replaced by cheaper materials, then the next thing to look at will be the basal medium. And the basal medium, in principle, is basically sports drinks like Gatorade. And because most of the component is basically sugar, amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. It's something you get in the common drinks in supermarkets. So, but if we use that, the cost of basal medium will be again much cheaper, and that's what that's what's being done. So, multiple sports drinks from the vending machine on the street in Tokyo, and they tested the osmolality and the pH, and we found out that at least one of these drinks were actually suitable for cell culture. So that's how we demonstrated cell culture by sports drink, which also implies that food grade components can be used for cell culture. And but in this experiment, it wasn't like it was not an entire replacement. It was only 50 to 60% that could be replaced with a sports drink. So later on, there has been an attempt of completely making a complete DIYing of basal medium, and the result is shown on this on an uploaded video on the chicken fetus heart cells primary culture by a DIY culture medium. But in the future, there has to be a different approach because right now, even though it's food grade, it's basically made by mixing individual ingredients. So the advantage is that it will be chemically defined, but the disadvantage is that it's inherently expensive. So in the future, we should be moving to a bulk food culture medium, like digested algae and yeast, digested algae and digested yeast mixed up or stuff like that. So which is not chemically defined, but it's suitable as food, and it can be prepared in a multi-million ton quantity. And by that time, there are different options like hydrogen bacteria cultured ultimately from solar power or nuclear power, and this yeah. So there's a typo there. Or algae. Algae cultured in some photobioreactors in about 100 times higher efficiency compared to just grass. And and by that time, we should also be looking at the supply chain of amino acids in the quantity of millions of tons. So currently, the global production volume of amino acids is about 6 million tons, and it's prepared from starch that mainly comes from corn and sugar beet and canes. And demand for that will increase massively. And so, which means we could keep on relying on corn and sugar beet and stuff like that, but it's probably better to find additional routes to get amino acids. And ultimately, that should basically close this matter cycle going between sewage to culture medium to cell cultured meat. And this may become especially critical when it comes to like space applications, let's say like cell cultured meat grown on Mars or on the moon, and or outer space. And then there's the next issue of making. So after cheap cell culture, we should be talking about tasty cell cultured meat, and otherwise it won't sell. And if you look at that, there are multiple stages, multiple phases for that. It's starting from sausages or burgers to bacon, and then ultimately to steak. And technologically, steak or whole culture tissue is the most technologically demanding. There we have to think about tissue morphogenesis, vascularization, meat texture, and all those things, which is not quite achieved even in regenerative medicine field, where literally billions are being spent. But the reason why billions are being spent is because of that very expensive growth factors and stuff. So if we if we solve the problem of expensive cell culture, which is pretty much getting solved, it also has a significant positive impact for the regenerative medicine, because then you don't have to be spending billions. It can literally it can come down to millions or even less if you are to do large scale cell or tissue culture. So regenerative medicine and cellular agriculture, they are pretty much the other side of the same coin. And the main difference would probably come from more not from technological issues, but more from like legal things. So it will be like purity, traceability, regulations, and those things. And personally, I feel it's somewhat funny if we manage to make cell cultured steak at a comparable price to the existing meat, while transplantable organ costs about 1 million times more expensive. But it turns out that if you culture your own cells possibly at home, you can actually make your own organ, and you can take that organ to a doctor and ask the doctor to basically implant the DIY organ. And it's under the current regulations that will probably be illegal, but if that illegal or DIY organ can save lives literally in millions of lives, then there must be something done to that. Or otherwise, those people would just go to China, North Korea, whatever countries to do that. And then we look at so we need to ultimately go to textured meat or steak. Then there's a toolbox for that. So first we have to get enough number of cells, and the cells has to differentiate, and these cells should be aligned in the right places, and then function as a living tissue. And the different and that the different products already sort of demonstrated, not quite the whole tissue culture yet, but the $250,000 burger in 2013 was more like a cell paste, so which doesn't function as a living tissue, but it's a massive chunk of cells, and the cells are somewhat differentiated. And cells are in order for the cell paste. That's quite somewhat questionable, but. But at least it's in the it's forming somewhat forming the muscle tissue. And then there's cell cultured steak prepared by Aleph Farms, and the steak prepared by Aleph Farms has got a texture similar to that of real meat, but it's not functioning as a tissue, because it's basically a cell paste mounted on plant-based cellular scaffold. So it's kind of close to molded meat. But ultimately, if we have to make a real steak, then we should be talking about cell culture of a living tissue. And for that, we need to achieve vascularization, which hasn't been quite achieved even in regenerative medicine. And it is achieved in some parts, but it's not entirely, and they tend to be very, very expensive. So, so that's another a major research target. And I mentioned cellular scaffold has got multiple benefits, like it gives a large surface area for cells to attach to and proliferate, and while supplying oxygen and other nutrients. And it also gives texture, and if carefully chosen, it gives the right texture as meat. And the simulation of fiber and meat texture, and as well as it can give shape to the whole thing in millimeter centimeter scale, which is kind of tricky to do with just cell culture. recently there has been a research result on doing animal cell culture on spinach leaves and spinach leaves. And I've seen that on popular media in last week. But there's it's probably built on 2017 results. And there's also 3D printing and plant hybrids that's being actively researched now. And that's basically, that uses, literally uses 3D printer. And that's how startups like Nova Meat, Redefine Meat, those plant-based meat startups are adding cultured cells to their option. And by this approach, what can be done is basically addition of fat cells incorporation of fat cells into plant-based meat to stimulate marbling. But 3D printing has got a inherent scalability issue, and that is a work in progress. And for some people in like finance backgrounds, there has been an IPO by an Israeli company called Metech to Nasdaq, and that company uses 3D bioprinting. So they can rapidly prototype, but at the same time, they haven't quite solved the problem of how to scale the product. So they don't have a revenue yet, and it's not quite quite different from other startups working on cell cultured meat. And so I talked about ultimately going to whole tissue culture, and to do that we need to do vascularization, which is construction of blood vessels, and that's a work in progress, and there's some research papers on that. And IntegriCulture company is actually going for this route. And with all these technologies incorporated, so it basically goes from the burgers, the sausages, although expensive, and then into bacon, meat chips, as we can see from other farms. And then we would move into whole tissue culture. And further down the road, we could think of something called like designer meat, where we start questioning the definition of meat, like green algae muscle cell co-culture system, like green meat. It has been done in academic, has been sort of demonstrated in academic labs, but certainly it hasn't been really looked at as it hasn't been really researched as a practical option for superfood. And then the next question is basically the scaling. And this $250,000 burger was made by, literally made by like this. And probably out of this $250,000, the labor cost of university students is not included in there. So it should be more expensive, I think. And also the scale itself is quite small. The so-called cell culture, animal cell culture, with the existing method, it's only as big as this, which is basically needs to be scaled much more, literally by 1,000 times. And if you look and to understand what's going on here, we need to look at what the assumptions being made to the process of cell culture, because the existing cell culture method is basically for medical applications, and that's highly optimized for laboratory scale. But if we are to think about cell cultured meat, it should be optimized to petrochemical complex scale, and what that means is, in case of laboratory use, avoiding contamination, that's being achieved by wearing gloves. But when it comes to industrial scale, you don't avoid contamination by using gloves, but mainly by designing a completely sealed system. And that's what and those engineering redesigns are the things that has to be done to go for industrial scale. And that process is somewhat underway. So now going from bench scale to industrial scale, and these engineering efforts are being made as we speak. And when it comes to this, when it comes to that sort of industrial scale, we will be talking about the discipline of plant engineering, and the things we talk about there includes like mixing method, temperature control, and how cleaning is being done, and what flow rate, pipeline diameter, and those things, which was not which was, and all these things are not quite talked about in laboratory scale cell culture, but will become a big issue in the plant engineering scale. And obviously besides just scaling and the cost of starting materials, the price will be different depending on the how we operate that industrial scale bioreactors. And there's also a bit of research done on that. So when it comes to industrial scale, perfusion bioreactor seems the most efficient. And that's where we can finally start talking about life cycle assessment of calculating the actual environmental footprint of this whole process. And since the whole process is not fixed yet, the error margin is quite big. So from energy use to greenhouse gas emissions, and two different researches done in 2011 and 2014 by the same author. And in the 2014 study, they included the environmental footprint of steam sterilization. And steam sterilization is a common practice in food industry. It's they basically pass high temperature steam through the cooking equipment to basically kill all the germs. But at the same time, that is a very, very energy intensive process. And if we are to apply that to cell-based meat, that alone basically hugely pushes up the energy use. But if we are using a disposable bioreactor made of, say, like bioplastic or something, then the environmental footprint will be much lower. So that alone has got huge error margin. And in addition to this primary LCA, there's also something called secondary LCA, which concerns which basically takes the wider picture of this whole process of meat production, because there are also byproducts. And if we are to switch to cellular agriculture from animal agriculture, then a huge area of land will be freed from feed production. And depending on how these freed land are repurposed, it has got a different, it leads to different figures for the for greenhouse gas emission and other things. And so that was the overall picture of the overall introduction to the science of cellular agriculture. And the rest goes to like politics, economics, and arts and culture and things. And since there's a limit in time, I'm skipping most of these things. But so if you're interested in learning more about cellular agriculture and cell culture meat, the places to look at include the New Harvest and Good Food Institute, as well as these conferences. and probably the most influential in here are New Harvest and Cultured Meat Symposium. And if you are into if you're into the science of cell cultured meat, probably the conference in Maastricht is the place to go. And when it comes to regulations or legality of selling cell cultured meat, it's really a work in progress, and different countries are taking different actions, and that's also this is also a quite fast moving space. So anything. So things could change in by next month or so. And but what I can say in overall is that countries that has got an agenda for food security, yeah, because they import most of the meat from outside, or the kind of reasons. Those governments tend to be supportive, while meat exporting countries tend to be a bit slower on that. But in case of the US, since they understand that it's not just meat, it's basically they're talking about the competitive edge of the whole industry. The FDA, USDA is working relatively fast to set a clear path to marketing cell cultured meat products. And yeah, some countries have got cell agriculture as a national strategic importance from a food security standpoint. And yeah, I'm skipping these bits. And yeah, and when they talk about regulatory issues and food safety, the things they mainly look at are basically what's being put into the the whole process of producing cell-based meat, as well as if the process is properly controlled. And when it comes to the materials to put in, the things they look at is are they approved food additives, or are they safe, or or does that have a history of consumption? And from that point of view, sugar, amino acid, vitamins, and minerals, all these things has got a long history of consumption. So we can say that it's okay to use these compounds. And literally, we could use sports drink for these things. Which means based on medium, it can have a grass status, and grass is generally regarded as safe, which means it's okay to use. And there's a question of growth factors, and that potentially requires safety testing approval. So those companies have to prove that if they are to use externally added growth factors, they have to prove the safety of these growth factors. And this whole production process has to be controlled under HACCP or GMP standards. And then at the end, you can produce marketable cell-based meat. And some of the things those regulators would probably look at the starter cells and what's in the culture medium, and what happens during the cell culture process. And there are different solutions for that, but all these are still work in progress at the moment in different companies, different startups. And so the vegetarianism things, I'm skipping this part for now. So and yeah, so there are startups working on cell cultured meat, and there's the regulators or the government entities, and there are also some enthusiastic people or the innovators of the cell agriculture, and all this and these things basically uh, since the day I founded Shojinmeat Project, I've been sort of like aligning these people in the right place. And what turned out happening is that Shojinmeat Project, which is a citizen science project, while the project does the main advocacy and other speculative art projects, and also the nurturing of next generation's decision leaders. Those people that came out of Shojinmeat Project go to more proper places like non-profit organizations, governments, and also those startups like IntegriCulture. And those people are sort of building the cellular agriculture ecosystem. And that's also what's actually happening in places like the US as well. So there are enthusiastic people, innovators, and people, former New Harvest fellows and academics. And then we have non-profit organizations supporting these movements, as well as speaking with the government. And then there are also startups bringing this to commercial reality. And what I'm hoping to achieve or build is basically when cellular agriculture industry come to reality, then how it's made is basically open. And as DIY scientists who invent new sort of meat, and if they find commercial opportunity there, they could take it to industrial scaling. And how to scale can be proprietary. That's that can go into the business domain, and that's how I hope to basically make cellular agriculture in transparent thing, as well as citizens keeping the initiatives in this field, while businesses can scale. And yeah, that's also like modeled after a lesson learned from genetically modified food, and in which case, although scientists showed the way, it basically went into business scaling without consulting anyone. And so, in case of cellular agriculture, what I firmly believe is that before the technology goes into business scaling and delivery, there should be citizens acting and discussing and setting the direction of how this technology should be used. And that's what I'm trying to achieve with the Shojinmeat Project, and also other spin-off organizations like Cellular Agriculture Institute of the Commons, as well as the IntegriCulture Company. Yeah, and I think it's the right time to go into question session.
Great, thank you so much. That's a great presentation. Yeah, I mean, everyone here, you can feel free to just type your question in the chat. But while you're doing that, I actually have a question. I was pretty interested in the idea of the co-culture system for producing growth factors.
Mm.
And I was wondering, when you're doing that, are you actually characterizing the growth factors that are being produced and characterizing how they're being used by the muscle cells that you're also trying to grow?
Yeah, so that the answer is we don't have to care about that. And the reason why this company is working on co-culture method is being so fast at producing meat and coming up with the product is that because they don't have to worry about all those analytical things. And ultimately, what we want to do is large-scale cell culture. And what growth factors act where, those things may be good to know, but it's not necessary at all.
So you're saying that hepatocytes can produce all of the growth factors that are needed for the myoblasts? Or...
It's not all. It's not all. So this is kind of an oversimplification, but the actual co-culture system that we use has got I've got a picture for that. Yeah. So it looks like this. So it's not just one, but it's like 3, 4 bioreactors and containing liver, not necessarily liver cells, but like say liver cells, pancreatic cells, placental cells.
That is pretty interesting. Cool, thank you. So we have a question from Sophie. Do you think there's potential for using agricultural byproducts as sources of amino acids and other compounds for cell culture media? Do you think this could be a feasible solution for media costs?
Yeah, well, we have to talk about the scale of that. So for short term, yes, that's possible. But when it comes to the industrial scale, the byproducts tends to be insufficient in terms of amount and also the supply stability. So those byproducts are only a short-term solution.
Yeah, and I would wonder about the possible impurities in some of those byproducts as well. Maybe they might harm cell cultures. Something to consider. You mentioned that you made your own sports drink medium for the cell culture.
Yeah.
Does this different media affect the sensory qualities of the meat that you produce?
That's being tested. So in addition to these experiments, recently there were some people using like energy drinks like Red Bull to supply the sugar component of culture medium. So that's basically using Red Bull to culture cells, which sounds a bit what is it? Not quite sure if I want to eat that before getting too high, but well, yeah, that's a possibility.
Okay, nice. So everyone can also feel free to just ask a question over voice if you have one.
Yeah, so because I haven't covered all slides, but all these slides are all available on the web. So you can just come up with questions that from slides that I haven't gone over.
Can you talk a little bit more about your approach for kind of recruiting people into the Shojinmeat project?
Yeah. So onboarding. So basically, one of the missions of Shojinmeat Project and related movements is that making this technology as approachable as possible. Which means one is make it as cheap as possible by whatever DIY method, as well as making it as funny as possible by doing some complete joke stuff, like and complete joke stuff like putting up the meat culture recipe on recipe website, or some people basically what is it? You made some like art projects and then put it into like science fiction manga and stuff like that, because Shojinmeat Project also have got an active program on basically providing technical information to artists and artists and writers, so that they can come up with works of science fiction or science fiction novel or manga, whatever media that includes the accurate portrayal of cell agriculture. And yeah, so those media includes this kind of visual novel games as well. And, yeah, so basically making this field open to literally everyone, not just scientists, and making this as approachable as possible. And that also comes to public acceptance of this technology, because one of the major concerns is that people get feared for something that they don't quite understand. But if the cellular agriculture becomes a primary school summer science project, then there's no fear anymore.
Yeah, so I actually work on some projects. One of them is a podcast that is looking at the consumer acceptance of cultured meat, and from a lot of the things I've learned so far, the familiarity with the idea and the concept of cultured meat is really key to consumer acceptance. So I think it's really awesome that you guys are working with artists and, you know, like putting this idea into like sci-fi or you know, discussing it in general day-to-day things, because I think that's pretty crucial for just regular consumers to hear about.
And there's also a quite important bit there, because what we are doing is we are trying to avoid, we're even trying to avoid consumer acceptance. We're talking about public acceptance. So there's obviously a clear difference between consumers and public. And if this and public includes existing farmers and chefs and those people as well. And without inclusion of these people, the whole cellular agriculture could repeat what happened with genetically modified food.
That's an interesting take on the word choice there. I'll have to bring it up to some other people. I haven't heard it used yet.
So it's basically a different way of framing. And if you look at the just consumers, then you're talking only from business domain. While if you're talking about the public, it will be talking about more. You're talking from more wider perspective, and that width is what is needed for cellular agriculture to come into like real use.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting too, because I'm just thinking about that idea applied, and I've seen a lot of people turn this question of like, oh, will vegetarians or vegans be interested in consuming this? And I think that's a great example of not consumer acceptance, but public acceptance.
Yeah. And that's how rulemaking is being done in Japan. So they basically, those government officials getting informed by the Shojinmeat Project and other people, they basically learned about what was going on in the US about this like, vegetarian versus non-vegetarianism and all these things. And they basically came to a conclusion of onboarding onboarding people of as many categories as possible. So they basically formed this food tech study group from April 2020, although the preparation has been done since 2018. And basically, it officially aims to achieve a cellular agriculture revolution with no one left behind. So there are existing food companies and farmers included in this roundtable discussion. And I think that's and if you're talking about just consumer acceptance, then probably you don't need all these different people on the left.
We had another question from Amber, more in terms of like how you got interested in cell cultured meat. Could you talk about how you became involved in this field?
Yeah, the reason why I got to know about cellular agriculture out from these kind of things, just science fiction world. So which could be anything. So like obviously space and super skyscraper, vertical farms, and rewilded Earth and all those things. And in 2000, and that was the whole reason why I got into science and go into like a Ph.D. in a more applied science. And before cell-based meat, I was in Tohoku University and Toshiba Corporation working on renewable energy, more specifically organic lithium-ion batteries. And the reason why I got into those energy and environment is because of science fiction. So like mid 21st century scenery of like wind turbines and solar panels everywhere. But after that, I thought about, okay, I want to do more real science fiction and got into cell cultured meat. But it was 2014 where very few people was talking about cell cultured meat. And I don't, and because since I didn't have money, or I don't have money yet, but yeah, and I had to start somewhere. And this kind of citizen science club or hobbyist club was was pretty much the only option to start, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different reasons that people might become interested in cultivating meat, but yeah, like the intellectual curiosity is definitely a legitimate reason.
Yeah, it was more like I've got too much influence on science fiction, manga, and anime, actually. Yeah, I think that's how these characters. I think these characters were designed back in 2014 or 15. So as soon as this whole thing started, like we came out with this kind of things. And yeah, that's how we were also selling these kind of like DIY cell culture manual on comic market. And it has got a description of the cell culture protocols in manga format, as well as the recipe for culture medium and stuff.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
Would you be able to recommend any other books that include cellular agriculture in them?
Well, books, to be honest, there are not that many publications dedicated for cellular agriculture, but there's a book called Clean Meat by Paul Shapiro. But the book is written from pretty much a vegan perspective, so it's sort of polarized. And so the other literature literally comes to like more like science research papers. And other than books, probably the place to look at are the blogs of New Harvest and Good Food Institute. And for the latest information, Protein Report is with online media where you can get the latest information on how this industry is coming.
I'm curious if you've seen any other companies or organizations in the space who apply kind of the same idea that the Shojinmeat Project is to cultured meat, with kind of integrating this into culture. And how would you advise other groups to start like implementing some sort of action in that regard?
I think cellular agriculture societies sort of try to do similar things, yeah, so first of all, the Shojinmeat Project is not part of a company. It's actually where companies come from, and it's an independent organization, and it's not even legally registered. It doesn't have a legal entity, and those things. I think in other places it exists as a DIY bio club or iGEMs or stuff like that. Have you heard about iGEMs, like International Competition of Genetically Engineered Machines?
So the last questions, I think we will address. So could you just talk about maybe the types of meat that you're trying to produce in IntegriCulture, and then can you give like estimates on the current costs for the production?
Yeah. So this IntegriCulture company is not a consumer product meat company. It's a company that provides the machines to make those things, and it doesn't have to be meat. It can be cell cultured fur or cell cultured cosmetics. But there are plans for demonstration products, and the first product is cell cultured cosmetics that we've just launched for B2B purposes. And then next coming is, the next is the cell cultured foie gras launching this December. And other, further products like meat or fur or whatever, it will probably be produced by companies that use our technology. So it's not, it won't be made by IntegriCulture company. It will be made by some another company using our stuff.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. So yeah, I don't think we have any more time for questions, but I guess would it be okay if some of our club members reach out to you maybe via LinkedIn if there are any further questions in the future?
Cool. Yeah, and this the Shojinmeat Project does like weekly meeting, but it could be a bit like unfriendly time for the people in California. But yeah, there's a weekly meeting as well, online meeting, but if anyone can join.
Yeah, and I saw there was a Slack as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you so much. This was very, very interesting. I was very excited to hear from you. Yeah, so with that, have a great day or a good night wherever you are.
Yeah. Thank you very much for coming to this event, and thank you very much for the invitation as well. Yeah.
Thank you.